Hi crafty friends! Today I'm sharing a 4th of July celebratory card and I'm using a couple of products to put this card together, but the focus is mainly on my background. So I'm using Trinity Stamps layered fireworks stencils with Altenew's metallic watercolors on black mixed media paper. I wanted to see if these watercolors would work with stencils. I also decided to pull out my Pixie Spray, which is a low-tack adhesive, just to make sure that the stencil would stay adhered to the panel. These metallic watercolors can be a bit thick, so as I learned, if you don't add too much water, it actually works pretty well. The stencils themselves are really easy to use. They are layered, so they go on top of each other. But the stencils have the patterns of the layers etched into them, so you'll know exactly how to layer them on top of each other. I used the Pixie Spray to adhere to the card panel, and I decided that I was just going to use the stencil as is. I'm not going to move them around. I'm just going to color in the areas and keep them as is because I didn't want too much movement and it would require a lot more patience than I had. So as I'm coloring in these little parts, I realized that if you let it dry and you pull up the stencil, you have a better chance of the colors not smushing together and oozing out of the stencil. I did do a test run just to make sure that I could do this, but this is the first time that I've filled up the entire card panel and hoped for the best as I pulled off the stencil. But I think it turns out really well. It just takes a lot of patience and you don't want to put too much color into the openings of the stencil because it does pull in and it could kind of smush, which some of the card does happen. I just didn't wait long enough to pull off the stencil, but most of it worked really great. And the cool thing about using watercolors with the stencil is that you can mix and match the colors. You can use a variety of different colors on one of the stencil layers, whereas if you were to ink blend, it'd be a lot harder to do so, especially like, for example, the circular fireworks, the different rings, I changed the colors, and you wouldn't be able to do that with normal ink blending or even heat embossing. I've used this fireworks stencil for a prior card using heat embossing where I just smushed the watercolor ink onto the stencil and added embossing powder, and that turns out really well too. But I really just wanted to play with the metallic watercolors because they look so pretty on black cardstock, and I thought that fireworks were perfect for this use, and I really like how it turned out. In my city, we've canceled the fireworks show, and it's to prevent the spread of COVID. And I am kind of grateful for that because I just don't want the temptation to go outside and, attend any large gatherings. Generally, I'm a homebody anyway, so I like to stay at home. And I know that a lot of people aren't the same and they want to go outside, but I feel like, if we can get past this whole spread of the COVID, we can go back to normal. And, 2020 has been a very trying year. There's been so many things going on that I just kind of like I'm hoping that the second half of this year is going to be much better. And I realized that I'm kind of getting back into my creative mojo. I'm creating more videos and I'm creating more cards. And I think that hopefully I'm able to share some inspiration. So I finished the card panel and I decided to add a few more stars here and there. I also manually go in and kind of dot the empty spaces just to fill it in, which I don't really know why I didn't just do a splatter when I'm watching this back, but I didn't and I think it turned out fine. So that's the finished panel, and look at the colors. They're so bright against that black cardstock that it just looks really pretty. So I did want to add a sentiment, and I used the Let's Celebrate sentiment from Trinity Stamps Sweet Surprise stamp set. This is a larger sentiment that basically fills the width of 4 1/4, which is a normal card panel or normal A2 card panel. And I missed a spot, so I'll go back and re-stamp that. I want to heat emboss this sentiment because I'll be adding distress inks over it, and I wanted it to be bright, and so once you add distress inks over it, you can go in with a wet cloth and wipe off any excess ink. So that's why I heat emboss it. I usually will use clear embossing powder for any black sentiments because black embossing powder isn't the best to play with, especially if it spills anywhere. So I also wanted to add a few critters, and the set from Lawn Fawn, Wish Upon a Star, is the perfect sentiment for it because the set intends for these little critters to be staring at the stars and the constellations. So I just stamp them out, and I also add masks to them because I'm adding that distress ink at the very bottom around the sentiment. So I wanted the little scene to kind of have a light reflection, so I used a bit of twisted citron towards the top, and that's just going to be where it's lighter because the light from the fireworks will reflect onto the grass and kind of brighten it up. I do go in with darker colors at the bottom. I used peeled paint and forest moss and just darkened it up. So for the coloring for the bunnies, I also wanted to add a little bit of light on the tip of their faces so it looks like the fireworks are reflecting off of their face, and it just brightens it up. So my trick for that is just to go in with a very light yellow. I believe I used YO2 and color in the tip of their face and the tip of their bunny ears, and it's just very light. And then I'll go in and color it like I normally do. I'll start with the lightest color and work my way out to the darkest, and then back out to the lightest and blending everything together. And once I'm at my lightest color, I'll lightly go over the yellow. Copics are transparent, so the color will show through. And if you want to add a little bit more yellow to it, you can go back in with your yellow color as well. But it just adds that little touch where when you put the card together, it does look like the fireworks are exploding and the light is reflected off of their faces, and it just really makes the scene look cohesive, and I really liked how it turned out. So I colored these bunnies using warm grays, and it's very simple coloring, and I only used 4 Copic markers. I did want the larger bunny to be darker than the baby bunnies, so that's why I used 4 colors. But as you can see, when I put it together, it does look like the fireworks are exploding in front of their faces and the light is just bouncing off their face. This card panel originally was a little bit bigger than the normal A2 card. I believe it was like 6 inches by 4.5, so I'm trimming it down a bit. The only problem that I ran into was that I really liked the bottom firework that was red, white, and blue, and I wanted it to peek out so you could see it. And because it's towards the bottom of the card, it didn't show up when I put it together. So I plan to mat this on a piece of gold glitter cardstock. And by moving it up a little bit, you're able to see that firework that I really wanted. So I had to trim down more of this card, which was a little heartbreaking because I put in so much time to color in a lot of the card panel, but I really just wanted that firework at the bottom to show up too. So I just had to trim it down, suck it up, and I was able to include the firework that I really, really liked. So I'm just adhering the card panel to a piece of gold cardstock, and for the bottom portion, I'm actually going to pop it up on foam tape. I do this because you can kind of like see behind the bunnies too, and so you can see more of that firework as well. Of course, it's not necessary. You can totally adhere it directly onto the card panel as well, but I just wanted to add that bit of dimension. So at the end, I thought that the bottom looked kind of empty, so I just trimmed out a 1/4-inch strip of the same gold glitter cardstock and added it to the bottom, and I think it really finished off the card. I realized that after I created the card, I was supposed to trim down this bottom portion, but I didn't, and you know what? It worked out. The gold strip kind of pulls the entire card together. So happy July 4th if you're in the US. I hope you enjoyed this card, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.